How's he look?
Calm down, calm down. It's over now. Relax. Let's go back. Let's go back to a simpler time, a slower time. What you're seeing now is the trailer for Call of Duty 1. It also served as an intro video to the game. The game which released 21 years ago now. We're doing a retrospective on Call of Duty 1 and its expansion pack, United Offensive. I played this game non-stop as a kid when it released. I was like 7 or 8. And here I am, still playing every new Call of Duty each and every year. Man, can you imagine if this trailer was released now, in 2024? Pre-order now for more frequent ammo for allied weapons, so you don't have to play each mission with a stolen MP40, for which you had to drop your amazing BAR or PPSH. Okay, just a quick history lesson. I know most of you already know this, but bear with me. Call of Duty was made by original developers of Medal of Honor Allied Assault. They worked at EA under a studio called 2015. Once they started pitching ideas for their next game, they wanted to make it more cinematic and depict the war in a more mature fashion. A cog in the war machine was frequently used term. Allied Assault, on the other hand, portrays your character almost like a superhero. For most of the levels you are alone and you do some pretty badass stuff, but for Call of Duty they wanted you to just be another soldier in the battle. EA didn't think this was the right direction to pursue, so they split off and went to Activision, which greenlit their game. They dubbed the project Medal of Honor Killer, and after approximately 2 years, Call of Duty was released. Judging by the state of Medal of Honor nowadays, you be the judge who was in the right. Infinity Ward even managed to snatch Michael Giacchino, the original soundtrack composer for Medal of Honor, and so he composed the soundtrack to Call of Duty as well. So I will be making a lot of comparisons to Allied Assault, as I and many others considered this to be the actual sequel to that game. I played Call of Duty 1 a lot as a child, so there's a lot of nostalgia involved. United Offensive though, not so much, so it's gonna be interesting to play through it now, 20 years later. For my playthrough I used the United Fronts mod. It's a pretty huge modification that I found out about just out of nowhere. It claims to combine both campaigns in the United Offensive executable, adds a whole bunch of quality of life stuff and also a huge amount of custom missions. I'm dying to play through those, but I'll be making a separate video about them later. There's so much to say about the base game and its expansion alone. So we start off with the original Call of Duty 1 campaign in the United Offensive updated engine, which means scopes now actually look like scopes, and you can sprint for a short distance. Why sprint wasn't included in COD2 and COD3 campaigns is beyond me, because it's a really nice feature and enhances the experience, makes the game feel just a tad bit more modern. What else makes the game feel like it's aged a bit better is the mod's upscale textures and new weapon models. The textures are very true to the original art style, and nothing stands out to break that nostalgic look. It just looks better. But to be fair, Call of Duty always had this unique, realistic graphic style, but unlike many games of that era that went for the same thing, Call of Duty never looks too dated to be an eyesore. It's genuinely a pretty game, with great colors, atmosphere and lighting. Nothing in these levels looks out of place. Every object is placed perfectly to guide you through these mostly linear paths, but it never feels claustrophobic or constrained in a video gamey sense like some older shooters. Like sure, you may be going down a very linear path, but there's so much scenery around you that it doesn't really feel that way. What aids the overall atmosphere is definitely the inclusion of allied NPCs going to battle with you. There will be many more gunshots around you, and not all of them will be directed towards you. And unlike in the later Call of Duty titles, these allied NPCs can actually kick some ass, even on the harder difficulties. Speaking of difficulties, I played this on Hardened, and it was such a great difficulty setting. I also made sure not to use quick saves, because those feel like cheating. The autosaves are not too frequent, but they're also not painful. The game will have the courtesy to give you a save point before a difficult section. What was super weird though is the fact that the game will not give you an autosave if you're on low health. as if it knew that you're gonna have a tough time and just forced you to replay the previous section in order to save up some more health for the next one. It was kinda weird, but I got used to it. I always love the glass cannon feeling in games, where you do a lot of damage but so can enemies. And enemies will kill you in 2 rifle shot stops, or even a 1 good place burst of SMG fire, even if you're on full health. This forces you to use everything in your arsenal to stay on top. Generally, you'll want to use grenades to flush Germans out of cover, because peeking and waiting for them to come out can be pretty dangerous, as there will be numerous enemies doing the same thing to you. You'll also want to have a rifle for longer ranges and an SMG when shit hits the fan. The linear corridors are quite wide, so you'll want to use flanking opportunities whenever you can, and will also be forced to backtrack to get that health pack that you saved, or pick up a more suitable weapon that you left on the ground. Your arsenal is limited to 2 primary weapons, which I guess is more realistic, but I prefer the Allied assault system of old school weapon slots. Thankfully, the dropped weapons don't despawn, so you can always remember where it was and come back for it later if needed. There were some crazy difficulty spikes, but we'll get to those later, like the United Offensive Bridge. But first things first. You start off as Private Martin, with the 101st Airborne. I love me some Airborne! You're a Pathfinder, so you get dropped first, and you need to scout the area and find a suitable landing position for your buddies, still in the sky. As you do that, you link up with your comrades and go to capture St. Mary Elise. The mission is split to 2 parts. One where you take the town, and the second one where you need to defend it from a counterattack. These missions are great. The town is beautifully crafted, and all along you fight with a dozen or so of your allies. It's truly a different experience than any other shooter at that time, and for some reason, this clicks more with me even than the newer Call of Duties. Here, there are no crazy set pieces. You don't do any crazy reality-defying stuff. You're just a soldier that needs to plant explosives more than the other guys. That's it. This feeling of a cog in the machine continues as you go on to take Breakover Manor, and even when your squad gets picked to do some special ops in the Bavarian Alps. You're still just a normal guy, and Captain Foley and Sergeant Moody are still there along with a bunch of other dudes. This persists through the entirety of the United States campaign, which lasts for 7 or 8 levels in the first third of the game.
Good job! Alright guys, we're moving on!
This, from what I can gather, is definitely the vibe Infinity Ward was going for when they were making this game. A cog in the machine, as they themselves described it. And it works. It's different and portrays the war in a somewhat realistic manner. But the game does not continue like this. As you enter the British campaign, you play through the capture of Pegasus Bridge, which plays out in a similar manner as St. Mary Elise. Nighttime level where you capture it, and daytime level where you defend it. Solid mission, huge difficulty spike in the defense against the tank section, but overall the mission had the same feel of you just being a random dude. But the next mission is where this vision falls apart. You are transferred to SAS for some special ops. But unlike with the Americans, here you roll alone, in sabotaging the Ether Dam. This feels most like a Medal of Honor Allied assault mission, and while it's fun, the scenery is great, and the level design very reminiscent of, say, Fort Schmerzen, it just doesn't have the same Indiana Jones superhero soldier vibe as Allied assault. Okay, here's something controversial. Big part of this is the lackluster soundtrack, or lack thereof specifically, and it was composed by the same dude that did the Medal of Honor soundtrack, which is baffling to me. COD1 soundtrack is not only very forgettable, it's also very underutilized. Pair this with you growing accustomed to a lot of gunfire, explosions, dialogue from your commanders and general big battle atmosphere, and now it's just silence. It simply doesn't work as well. Thankfully, the level is a good challenge and fun to beat. Regretfully, the following 2 levels are the most painful ones in the entire game. You, along with Sergeant Waters and Captain Price, need to escape on a truck to the nearby airfield. Oh, did I mention how goofy Price is in this game? Like, we know him as this ultimate badass and spewing philosophic stuff in this stoic and deep voice.
The healthy human mind doesn't wake up in the morning thinking this is its last day on Earth. But I think that's a luxury, not a curse. To know you're close to the end is a kind of freedom. Good time to take inventory.
Well, goodness me, Americans.
Put a PS. Please, please, please stop.
And something even more random. This guy is Jason Statham.
Protection from what? The Germans?
I love Jason Statham in this game. Too bad they couldn't feature him more. I'm sure he got some decent exposure from Call of Duty 1. Anyway, back to the plane. You need to defend your truck from like a dozen of German trucks and cars and motorcycles. Jason here doesn't do anything except waste your Panzerfaust if you take too long to pick it up. And the Panzerfausts aren't infinite, but you may want to hold on to the one in your hand in order to get a clear shot. But if you take too long, Jason here will just fire it into the road. There's no cover, you can't hide at all, there's not enough medkits, and because you're always on low health, the game won't give you autosaves. I played this for like an hour in the evening and I couldn't beat it. Thankfully, the next day, the planets aligned and I beat it in like 15 minutes. I was so glad, man. Finally, it's over. Then the next level started. First, you need to get past the defenses on the airfield, and then you get offloaded to an AA gun to shoot down the German Stuka aircraft while they're taking off, and then defend your position from the strafing runs and dive bombs. This would be fine if the Germans weren't hammering you on foot as well. Your position gets pounded by waves of enemies, and you have to jump relentlessly from the AA gun back to cover to kill some Germans that have a clear sight on you. You're very fragile. There's not a lot of ammo, way too few medkits, and no autosave in between. Once you do fend off the airplanes, it's back to the truck for a quick stroll to the runway, to the airplane you're gonna escape on. Except, you can die here as well. There's no cover in the truck. Once I died at literally the last second of the level, just before the fade to black. I had to replay the entire defense section. Such a pain. Anyway, what follows is probably my favorite level from this special ops arc, the battleship Tirpitz. This was a bit mind-blowing at the time. There's this entire battleship, modeled and explorable in-game. This level is also used as a multiplayer map, which I played a lot back in the day. It's a pretty great portrayal of the ship and a great set piece. I just wish they animated it exploding and capsizing at the end, but unfortunately you just drive away on a boat. This is also the mission where the OG Captain Price from the World War II era dies. Good mission, good challenge, similar to the Either Dam. I can't help but think though how much better this level would have been in Allied Assault though. Anyway, onward to part 3 of the campaign.
Comrades, this day will be the proudest day you have ever lived. You will fight the fascist Nazi invaders with all your strength. For each and every fallen Soviet soldier, you will make them pay with 10 of theirs. There will be no mercy for defeatists, cowards, or traitors. Anyone caught deserting his post will be shot.
The Russian portion starts off strong, but then it plummets to even lower lows than the British one. The first level is a crazy good set piece, definitely a standout. It recreates the enemy at the gates crossing of the Volga River, complete with all the one gun per 2 soldiers bullshit, but hey, it works for the game. The level is chaotic, very atmospheric and on par with the D-Day landing levels from many other games. What hampers it a little is the Russian voice acting. It gets even worse the more you progress in the campaign. The entire Russian campaign just goes lower and lower and lower in terms of quality, level design, atmosphere, and general care by the developers. It really feels like they were rushing this part of the game, or just didn't care anymore. There are no more set pieces after this. You will find your way slogging through the rubbles of Stalingrad, its sewers, and then a tank factory in Warsaw. This looks also uninspired. There's barely any friendly NPCs, huge lack of soundtrack, No interesting objectives, and also no really new and good-looking scenery. Even the German winter uniforms look unfinished. In the original game, they just wear like a white hoodie. So bizarre. Thankfully though, the United Fronts mod fixes this by putting in some actual good-looking uniforms. The mod, strangely, also tries to address some shortcomings in the atmosphere of the Warsaw levels. In the original game, the mission is supposed to be this assault, but it's mostly just you going from hangar to hangar and clearing out the Germans. In this mod though, they added a bunch of fights outside the explorable part of the map, which you can observe through the windows and also help your comrades out. Such a great addition by the mod authors, even though it's a bit glitchy at some parts. And while on the subject of additions by the mod, you'll see a great deal of added weapons to all factions' arsenals, all historically accurate. The mod will also remove some of the later war weapons from levels that take place before they were produced. The weapon models are all replaced with models from COD2, World at War, and I think Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway, but I'm not sure. The models fit great in the game and nothing looks too out of place. Pretty good job. A big new feature is the ability to choose your loadout before the start of the mission. Great addition as well, I love it. Kind of reminiscent of Medal of Honor Airborne. And also now you have a mission select screen, not too different from the ones in the later Call of Duty games. Here you can choose between COD1, United Offensive and Community missions, but we'll talk more about those later. Let us go back to the Russian campaign though, because there was one more standout mission that I didn't mention before, which is Paulo's house. This was one of the hardest part of the game for me, but unlike the British painful missions, this one didn't irritate me as much. Here you need to take over and then hold this big apartment building nicknamed Paulo's house. Everything here is difficult. Getting even close to the house was a huge pain in the ass. There's 2 machine guns and 20 or so Germans all around the house, and you have zero cover while you cross the street. Thankfully the checkpoint is just before the house, so there's that. Next part is the defense, where you're tasked with taking out German tanks while your comrades take care of the infantry. Now, the Russian NPCs are quite capable of holding their own when stacked up against a similar number of Germans, but here you're outnumbered at all times but like 20 to 1, so NPCs are useless. What's even crazier is that the tanks can actually shoot through the windows and can take you out anywhere in that part of the house. So good luck taking out the tanks. Thankfully, for the level to progress, you just need to take out 2 tanks, and then I found out that it was the best to go hide in the basement since the tanks couldn't shoot you down there. Wait out the 5-minute timer for reinforcements and then come out poking out of the ground, taking all the credit. GG. The game's final part is a collection of 1 American, 1 British and 1 Russian mission. The Americans have now reached Bastogne, and this mission was like a breath of the fresh air, because the quality is back on par with the first part of the game. Captain Foley returns, and once again you're in a battle with 15 or so friendly troops. What follows is a British mission with Jason Statham, where you need to take out some V2 rockets, and the final mission of the game, which is taking the Reichstag in Berlin. This once again feels very rushed, empty, overall janky. The Russian campaign doesn't have a friendly ally like Captain Foley or Sergeant Moody that go with you through each mission. Instead, it's just mostly silence while you slog through a section of Berlin and the Reichstag. Compare it to Fort Schmerzen from Allied Assault. There's 3 or 4 levels of setup towards the Schmerzen and then the actual intense and butt-clenching assault. You finally manage to get on and you look at your handiwork while the screen fades to black and credits roll to an uninterrupted god-tier soundtrack. What holds the final part back is also the fact that the game's difficulty is all over the place. The difficulty doesn't ramp up towards the end. The Reichstag mission isn't your ultimate test of skill where you need to use everything you've learned up until that point to beat the game. It's just a level, nothing special about it. Now sure, the Reichstag looked great at the time, but I wonder how it could have actually looked if the developers didn't rush the Russian campaign and put in some effort actually. I have mixed feelings on Call of Duty 1. It shows great promise at first, but then it fizzles out a bit. I also can't help but compare it to Allied Assault, which clearly I prefer. Not that I don't like the idea they were going for with Call of Duty, but I wish they actually stuck to it and fall, you know? Because when the game starts getting this existential crisis and starts throwing in these Medal of Honor missions without the formula of what made those missions good, it just falls apart. Had the game stuck to its American campaign style and presentation, it would have been much better. Thankfully, some later installments did learn from this, and we get some absolutely S-tier games. Still, Call of Duty 1 is fun. It's a nice challenge in hardened and regular difficulty, especially if you can resist quick saves. Next up, United Offensive.
Oh, hey, great. Good move. Remind me to thank the captain.
Shut up, Eldred! Get your ass out! Let's go, Martin! Move it, move!
I can't believe I agreed to do this.
This is the last point on our patrol. The sooner you men can scout that ridge over there, the sooner we can get back and get some hot chow.
Hey, Sarge, can't we just skip the patrol and go straight to the hot chow?
Ender, I'd find that funny if I wasn't freezing my can off. Now get out of here. Meet back at the Jeep when you've done your sweep.
After beating COD1 and slugging through the later parts, the first mission in United Offensive was amazing. You're back with your 101st buddies. Captain Foley's here, Sergeant Modi's here. Plenty of chatter, plenty of dialogue, explosions all around you, endless hordes of German troops and panzers. You're getting overwhelmed and must hold the line. Truly some epic stuff. I don't remember much of this campaign from back in the day. I used to play the original game quite a bit, but United Offensive I maybe beaten twice in the past 20 years. This felt good. The missions are quite a bit longer than in the original, though there is less of them. The objectives are a bit more varied, and there's also lots more scripted stuff and set pieces. While Allied Assault's expansion packs were really mediocre compared to the main game, United Offensive is blowing the main game out of the water in the first few missions alone.
Can anyone in this damned army speak German?
I can, Sarge. A little.
The expansion was developed by Grey Matter Entertainment, while the original team, Infinity Ward, went on to develop Call of Duty 2. Now, Grey Matter would later on become the one and only Treyarch. This expansion pack feels like it took to heart the criticism of the main game and doubled down on the good parts and improved the bad ones. I've been going through old reviews when these came out, and they pretty much shared a lot of my opinions. I felt relief actually, because now I knew I didn't just hamper on the main game because it's very old. The American campaign continues with the objective of capturing Foy and Neuwell, and takes a lot of scenery and visual cues from Band of Brothers. Very good missions. There's a huge stinker in the American campaign though, and that's the infamous bridge crossing. You're getting fired on by 3 machine guns, one of which is on a tank. A tank that also fires its cannon. So when you take out the 2 normal machine guns, you still need to get across while under fire from the tank with 0 cover. While you're doing that, the enemies respawn in a very rapid fashion. You can imagine how this goes, but fortunately I managed to beat it in like 7 or 8 tries. I can only imagine playing this on Weatherrun. I know I beat it on Weatherrun once, but I used quick saves, which is basically cheating, so I consider this hardened, no quick saves to be my ultimate test. The next mission is the capture and defense of Neuwell, which is probably the lengthiest Call of Duty mission up to this point, and it's very good. The defense part especially has to be my favorite defense section up until this point. It was difficult, but I didn't need to cheese anything, and the checkpoints were generous. Here comes the first problem I had with the United Fronts mod. Don't get it confused, United Fronts is the mod, United Offensive is the expansion pack. Now, the original Call of Duty 1 has a pretty good sound engine, for which you had to have a dedicated soundtrack back in the day in order to enjoy the EAX functionality. EAX can be emulated nowadays by a program called Creative Alchemy, which I highly recommend if you have a decent sound setup. The sound should be amazing, but as it stands with this mod, it was quite a bad experience. The mod replaces a lot of the gunfire sounds, which aren't as crisp and sound somewhat noisy and blown out. The biggest ear destroyer, however, is the sound of the Sherman tanks, which is magnitudes of levels above any other sound in the game. It completely ruins the entire audio experience. Hopefully the mod authors can address this, because apart from this, I've had very little issues with the mod. After Neuwil, we get this nice 144p pre-rendered video with a bitrate of around 2 kilobits per second. Good stuff. Good stuff. Next up, the British campaign.
Navigator, what's our position and status?
Skipper, we'll soon be over the coast. Simmons ran into some heavy flak here.
It starts off with the most beautiful loading screen ever. Look at it. And before you know it, you're in a B-17 bomber. This mission is somewhat similar to Black Hats in World at War, minus the PT boats. Instead, you just shoot down a bunch of German aircraft while you protect your squadron in delivering the bombs. I'm not sure if you can fail this mission. It's really not a challenge, but I like the novelty of it. It's a cool set piece. Anyway, you get blown out of the sky and have to parachute down deep into enemy territory. You're saved by Major Ingram, a returning character from Call of Duty 1, and he also appears in Call of Duty 3. Your mission now is to destroy a railway bridge together with a squad of Hollandese resistance. This is a very cool mission, with a great set piece where you destroy the bridge. From that point onwards, your character becomes a part of the SAS, same as in the main game. The difference here though is that the following missions in Sicily are much more fleshed out, more fun, and you have a whole team with you. You're not solo, even here, so once again the expansion pack plays to its strengths. The mission is to sabotage coastal guns in Sicily in preparation of Operation Husky. The first part is quite difficult. You have to fight through bunkers and fort filled with enemies. Italians, actually. For the first time in Call of Duty. A nice change of pace.
Buongiorno.
Your arsenal of picked up weapons will consist of Carcano rifles, Breda machine guns and a Modello 38 SMG. You don't see these in many shooters of the era. I don't remember if these were actually in the original game too, or if they are modded in, but pretty cool stuff.
Dominic De Coco.
Come in.
Dominic De Coco.
Bravo. Bravo.
One thing I need to point out, this is for Call of Duty 1 and United Offensive. There's very little extras in these missions. I wish there were some collectibles hidden around the level or secrets, some hidden armories or hidden objectives would have made the exploration of these levels much more rewarding. As it stands, you're not missing much by just rushing the objectives, but I guess this is from the vibe they were going for and it works. Still, I love me some hidden objectives, like in Medal of Honor, or those laptops from Call of Duty 4 as collectibles, you know. These things are a bit more gamey and maybe immersion breaking, but come on, it's still a video game.
Margarete.
Once you're done with the guns, you have to escape. What follows is a similar sequence to the truck escape from Either Dam in the main game, except here you're on a motorbike and the mission isn't as mind-numbingly difficult. As a matter of fact, it appears as if your health is increased by a tenfold or something during this sequence. It makes it much more cinematic and enjoyable, and you can still get your ass kicked if you don't pay attention. You just need to make it to the docks and escape on a boat. What a great set piece this is. Fantastic bunch of very unique missions for the British campaign. And a nice change of pace from the big battles in the American campaign. But oh boy, even those couldn't prepare me for what comes next. The Russian campaign is batshit insanity. These are the most atmospheric missions up until this point. There are bombers flying above you, you're getting pounded by artillery, enemies are coming from all sides, the battlefields are nicely detailed, there's lots of dialogue and a bunch of set pieces. This is such a contrast to the main game's Russian campaign. I enjoy this very much, apart from one crazy checkpoint. You get a game save once you clear out the second flank of the front, and now you need to go back to the main line. So now you need to go through a bunch of trenches and tunnels to get back to where you started, all while getting shelled by artillery, which can randomly kill you. When you get back though, your commander orders you to go on foot and charge elephant tanks and plant explosives on them. There's 3 tanks and a bunch of enemies around them. You'd think there would be a checkpoint here, but there isn't. Yeah, this sucked. It took me half an hour to beat this objective. Much more frustrating than the bridge section in the American campaign, as there you at least got a checkpoint in front of the bridge. Anyway, once this is done, the mission is back to being awesome. Now, let's compare this factory section to the one in the main game. Here, there's at least 20 friendly NPCs fighting alongside you. The environments are much more detailed. The mission is so much more enjoyable. There's also a tank level. Unfortunately, you once again play with a T-34, same as in the main game, so this mission is pretty much the same. It's a shame we didn't get to drive a Sherman tank in the Battle of the Bulge, but hey, Prokhorovka is arguably the biggest tank battle in history, so gets a pass. Once again, I need to draw a comparison to Allied Assault. You drive a King Tiger there, but there's a whole section of game dedicated to building up to that King Tiger. You even go and steal the prototype documents and operating manual. That's the entire mission in the game. Then the next mission, you need to take a squad through German lines in order to steal the tank. And once you do get in, it feels amazing. COD1 and United Offensive could have benefited a bit with a bit more context to these tanks. Say for instance you're defending a town, getting annihilated, and then the tanks come in to save the day. You could then go back and play a section with the tank through the events of how it got there, and then, you know, defend the soldiers in the town. But anyway, whatever, I'm just rambling here. The tank missions are forgettable, but they aren't annoying or anything like that. Next up is Kharkov. Man, look at these loading screens. Aesthetic. This is the penultimate mission. You're tasked with retaking the city of Kharkov. This one is exhilarating. My favorite city mission up to this point. The atmosphere is off the charts. The city is so much more detailed, the buildings are varied, and my god, the lighting. Compare this to Berlin from the main game, and it's really a no contest. What stood out to me while playing United Offensive is how much more prominently the soundtrack is featured in these missions. It's louder and present at all times. I don't think there are any new tracks in the soundtrack, but they are used better than the main game. And this is it. We've come this far. The infamous train station. Remember when I bitched about how the main game didn't ramp up the difficulty and have a worthy final mission? One that would test all your skills and make you use your entire arsenal. Can I take it back? The final mission of United Offensive is one of the most difficult things I've ever beaten in any video game ever. Holy shit! This thing took me 3 hours and 15 minutes of gameplay time to complete. I was challenged, I was tested, I used everything that I possibly could in this game. All the weapons, all the tactics. This was a gauntlet unlike any other. Truly some Dark Souls, Devil May Cry shit. This entire section felt almost like a puzzle that I had to assemble. Through trial and error, I would find out what worked and what didn't at each section of the defense. And when I found out how to complete it, there was just a matter of actually completing it. Yeah, after you blow up the 5 tanks, you get a 2-minute reinforcement timer. I just hid here for the entire 2 minutes. No shame. My heart was pounding. What if a random German walks up and gets me? What if they throw a grenade? Can Stukas get me here? But alas, the screen faded to black, my butthole unclenched. It was over. Regretfully though, my footage of the Russian campaign got corrupted on the disc. So what you're seeing here now is me replaying it on regular with quick saves. I was planning on showing you a montage of me wasting 3 hours of my life on this section, but I just can't bring myself to go through it again. Maybe on a stream someday, hey? Who knows? United Offensive was awesome. This felt like a sequel, or what the main game should have been. I know not many people played it. Hell, even the main game is pretty forgotten nowadays. But damn, what a great shooter. I would say Call of Duty 1 can be good when viewed through rose-tinted glasses. It's just way too dated by today's standards. The mission design is all over the place. The lackluster soundtrack, uneven difficulty, an entire third of the game rushed and unfinished. But United Offensive is not. It is genuinely a good first-person shooter, and I wished it released standalone at some point. It wasn't even ported to Xbox with the main game, which is quite a shame. And some final words about the mod, The Forgotten Fronts. I really do think this is the best way to play the original Call of Duty and the expansion pack. It has some jank, namely the audio, but the other additions simply outweigh the negatives. The ability to easily set a widescreen resolution, the loadout selection, the mission selection, the improved graphics, the new weapons, the new character skins and models. All of these are added intuitively and in a non-immersion breaking manner. Nothing really stands out in a negative way, and it's a really thoughtful modification to the original game.
Major Ingram, SOE. Our friends from the Dutch resistance saw your plane go down, so we decided to have a look in case Jerry got too curious.
What is left, when you're done with the campaigns, is the community-made missions. And some of these are really cool. If you're a huge fan of the older first-person shooters, like me, this is pretty interesting. Some of them can be very janky, but there are quite more than a few which are genuinely good. We'll take a look at all these custom missions in a separate video or maybe a live stream. I was planning on having it all combined in one video, but this is already way too long, so yeah, man. Hey man, since you made it this far in the video, could I ask you to subscribe? Maybe check out my video on Call of Duty 3. I mostly play older video games, and I'll be streaming a lot too. You might want to come hang around a bit, maybe we'll play one of your favorite old school games. There are some links in the description that help out the channel if you want to check them out. And finally, thank you ever so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. Have a good one. Pre-order now for the ability to skip the damn bridge and the stupid final train mission. Jesus fucking Christ.